Traditional morality does not exist. There is no divine code delivered from a mountain on high, and no cosmic salvation is coming. This realization is liberating, but it places the entire burden of survival on our own shoulders. When we ignore this responsibility, liberal democracies lose their compass. Without a shared, conscious framework for improvement, societies drift into a status quo defined by mindless consumption and a paralyzed fear of the unknown. This drift creates a vacuum where kleptocracies flourish. You end up with a government that treats the state as a mechanism for self-enrichment, overseeing a citizenry too ground down by the friction of daily survival to resist. Reversing this decay requires a civic immune system, a framework of 5 specific virtues designed to keep the system awake: courage, discipline, intellect, vigilance, and vigor. These virtues function as architectural requirements for survival. The same psychological mechanics that allow an individual to function effectively scale directly into the blueprints for how the state itself must be governed. This process begins with courage, defined as the rejection of cowardice. It is the choice to do what must be done, even when fear makes the outcome uncertain. At the individual level, courage is the choice to stand back up after being knocked down by trauma or mental illness. It is the grueling, daily process of improving one's own circumstances, despite the weight of personal history. Scale that up, and you see a courageous state. This is a government willing to enact risky, controversial legislation to fix structural rot, and one that maintains a physical readiness to deploy violence whenever the nation's preservation requires it. The second virtue, discipline, acts as the counterforce to decadence. It is the rejection of the modern consumer mindset that prioritizes immediate, unchecked acquisition above all else. For the individual, discipline means being content with having enough. It is the ability to mend what is broken and appreciate existing resources, acknowledging that we live on a planet with a limited pool of assets. At the macro level, the state practices discipline by rejecting the immediate gratification of privatization or debt-fueled expansion. Instead, it prioritizes strategic, patient diplomatic compromises that build long-term institutional integrity. Restraint is power. Whether you are managing a household budget or a global alliance, the ability to check your basest impulses creates the stability necessary for growth. The third virtue is intellect. Within this framework, intellect is the capacity for critical thinking and the aggressive rejection of ignorance. You see this in the tradesperson or the farmer who learns to solve novel problems by understanding the mechanics of their world. They refuse to consume data they cannot rationalize or apply to their own lived experience. A state practices intellect by centralizing information and pulling truthful conclusions from it. It funds intelligence agencies and refuses to fly blind, prioritizing data collection even when the findings are politically inconvenient. This commitment to information enables the fourth virtue, vigilance. It is the rejection of complacency through a policy of hoping for the best while actively preparing for the worst. A vigilant citizen stays informed and maintains emergency supplies. They understand that by preparing for localized crises, they ensure they do not become a burden on the state's resources during a larger emergency. Scale this to the state, and vigilance becomes a state of constant strategic improvement. The government recognizes that peace is fragile, requiring it to constantly test its defenses and battle readiness to prevent decay from inviting invasion. Society survives only when the people on the street and the intelligence networks in the state apparatus remain equally alert. When both levels are wide awake, the system becomes nearly impossible to surprise. The final virtue is vigor. It is the rejection of indolence and the sedentary habits that have come to define modern infrastructure. For the individual, vigor is basic physical articulation. It is as simple as going for a walk and rejecting the 8-hour stationary workday, recognizing that the human body was not designed to remain stationary. The state facilitates this by designing walkable cities and ensuring access to affordable, raw nutrition. This lowers the long-term physical burden on the populace, creating a healthier citizenry that requires less emergency medical intervention. Reducing these systemic healthcare costs frees up billions in capital. That individual physical momentum effectively clears the path for the state to redirect those resources into infrastructure and economic growth. These virtues create a closed, symbiotic loop. The individual and the state are locked in a mutual pact of accountability. where the strength of one node directly supports the other. When the citizen practices these virtues, they reduce the friction within the overall system. A healthier, more disciplined, and better prepared populace requires fewer interventions, allowing the state to concentrate its resources elsewhere. In return, a state that governs through these same virtues provides a predictable, stable foundation. It secures the borders and the economy, creating the necessary platform for the individual to thrive and create. This position of authority is never a given. The state must earn its role as a steward every single day by demonstrating the same courage and vigilance it expects from its citizens. A resilient society refuses to wait for salvation. They stand on guard, holding themselves and their government to a singular standard of survival.